All right, everyone, going to be doing the deep dive here for the Week 6 props. And I will just be touching on the Sunday games. So going to be going game by game to see if we can find any edges potentially for props betting. And so we're going to start with the Washington Commanders versus the Atlanta Falcons. We can see 2.5 point spread, 42 for an over and under. So a very kind of close game, but maybe potentially an ugly game. We look at the injury situations for each team. Jonnu Smith currently questionable with an ankle injury. If he sits, they might just be forced to give Kyle Pitts a lot of work. And also Parker Hesse is also out as well. So like they would be down to their first string and fourth string tight end. They do like to run a lot of 12 personnel, so they might be forced into throwing the football a little bit more. The Commanders, in terms of prop betting, probably nothing that we're looking at too much. We'll go ahead and start out with the Washington Commanders. For the props that we are currently getting, we can see Brian Robinson's rush total. It's kind of an interesting one at 59.5. We know with Brian Robinson at this point that his production is very much dependent on game flow. Now, can he get some work in the passing game? He can. He looked pretty good doing that last week, but for the most part, his production is going to be very dependent on what he does in the passing or what the game flow is. That's going to not predict, but that's going to tell us what he's going to do rushing and in the receiving game. Looking at Curtis Samuel, we're not really getting a big edge there. Sam Howell passing yards set at 240.5, and I don't know, that one seems a little bit too high to me. Like if I was trying to force a bet in there for this game, I would say we could bet the under there. And that's just more the Washington Commanders have been, the Atlanta Falcons have been pretty good against the pass, and they're pretty good at having long established drives with their running game, And so to me, we could be betting that. And like if you're watching that game, like Sam Howell, like the stats would say differently, but Sam Howell had a terrible game. Like it was just flat out bad. He was missing wide open receivers the whole game, choosing to force the football into Logan Thomas, choosing to scramble at the wrong times. Like he played poorly. And so will he play that bad again? It's tough to say, but if he does, I do expect the Falcons to be able to capitalize on that, have some long sustained drives. Thus, I don't think Sam Howell is going to be able to pass for that over. But we're seeing that all these are probably going to be forcing in there a little bit. Maybe we get a good prop for Logan Thomas for receptions. Jahan Dotson, was kind of the forgotten man because Logan Thomas was getting force-fed the football. Now it is going to be a pretty good matchup there for Logan Thomas, so maybe we get like a fantasy score prop for him. Like I would imagine his receptions prop is going to be 3.5. The yards are set at 36.5. So do the math on that. His fantasy score should probably be set at like 7.5, I would imagine. And if that's the case, we could be betting the over there for Logan Thomas. Now we go ahead and get into Atlanta, guys. Desmond Ridder played his best game of his career last week. I mean, he was the reason they won. And honestly, it's a small thing, but his hard count, he had the team jump off sides 4 times and he caught them 5 times with his hard count. I don't know what was going on there. It was kind of crazy that kept happening. And literally, you could point to that being because it was a close game. Heck, if you were watching the game, you probably would have thought Houston would have won that game. But a little thing like that, like he just kept them on their toes. They weren't able to get home, and he was able to deliver some nice passes. He was able to do that to Drake London. He had himself a good game. But John Robinson, annoyingly not involved, and that's because literally right away at the start of the game, they're like, the broadcast crew brought up that Arthur Smith made a point of giving Tyler Algier more work that week, and that is exactly what happened. So I'm kind of just taking the wait and see approach on Robinson from this point on because we just do not know what to expect from him. And kind of same thing with Ridder. He did get a pretty nice rushing touchdown. It was a little bit of a RPO. Not an RPO, but it was more or less, do you give it to the running back up the middle or do you pull it? He pulled it, got a touchdown. Very solid decision, very good run. That being said, it almost seems like if they're going to be successful, they need to have some more design runs to him. So that's my way of saying this rushing prop is definitely interesting because you could almost see them make a point of emphasis to try to get him more involved running the football. For the passing yard prop, it's very difficult to say what we should be doing there because most games he hasn't looked good throwing the football. He's had 2 pretty decent games, but most of the time it's ugly. So I'm probably just staying away from that. We'll go ahead and get to the next game on the slate. It is going to be Minnesota versus the Chicago Bears. Now, this one is going to be a fun game. I think it has a chance to be a little bit more of a shootout than what we are currently seeing. The over-and-under is only set at 43.5. That's going to be because Justin Jefferson is going to be out. That's going to be because, well, it's tough to imagine the Bears having that good of an offensive game again. 2.5 point dogs. And guys, I would almost say like the Vikings should really win that game. They should probably win by a decent amount. Looking at the Chicago Bears, they are still very banged up defense. It was really shocking that they weren't able to take advantage of that matchup a little bit more than they did. But, it was a short week. We just see weird stuff happen in those Thursday night games a lot of the time. And I don't know. I like watching it. I don't think anyone would say Fields was uberly impressive. Like, he made the plays that were there. He made the plays that any quarterback should be able to make. That's starting. He missed more plays than he made. That was my takeaway from it. Like, Darnell Mooney is so frustrated with Justin Fields right now. DJ Moore, on the other hand, he exceeded what he should have been able to do on several plays. And that's kind of what gave Justin Fields the bump in his stats. And I think that's why the line is being presented to us this way. And obviously with Justin Jefferson out, that's going to hurt them. He is on the IR. We know that. Jordan Addison currently questionable. We expect him to play. And if he does play, I think we're just looking at the Vikings to win this game, but win it probably by a full score. Now, they haven't really been able to do that thus far. They've really been keeping teams in the game. Last week, anyone that was watching the game probably saw the Chiefs get bailed out once again. So just kind of interesting there. I do want to start out with Jordan Addison, just calling that out. He is someone that I loved in camp. I was like, I can't wait to see this guy play in NFL games, and he has been standing out. He had one dud, and everyone kind of forgot about him. He hadn't been playing as many snaps as you would have liked, but we have seen that snap share increase and increase. And against Carolina, what do? You try to rush the football. That is their weakness, and that is what occurred. So in this game, I do expect Addison to be involved, but you expect TJ Hawkinson to be involved, a little bit of KJ Osborne there as well. The biggest question mark I have is going to be which of the two running backs, Cam Akers or Alexander Mattison, is going to be the most involved, because Mattison has been impressive, but so is Cam Akers. Like, surprisingly, he's looked better than I would have expected. They've actually looked pretty similar, those two. But let's go ahead. We'll start out with Minnesota, see which props we are getting there. So for the Vikings, will Kirk Cousins rush the football? Probably not. Heck, and if they're winning, kind of like the way I think they're going to, maybe gets a couple of QB knees at the end of the game, and the under hits there. Teams can rush the football against the Chicago Bears, and maybe this is a line that we're looking at. Once again, I do think the Vikings are going to be playing with the lead here, and so we can see 48.5 on PrizePicks is going to be the lowest line that we're getting for Alexander Mattison across the industry, so that is going to be a pretty good one, I would say. Jordan Addison, this is a much better bet on one of the sports books here at 58.2 on average. I like the over there, guys. I do. I think Addison is going to have himself a very good game against this banged up Bears secondary. Like, you look at Sam Howell, he was missing wide open receivers. I'm going to keep bringing this up. Kirk Cousins should be able to take advantage of those mistakes that the Bears were making. The Bears were pretty much daring Sam Howell to beat them, and he didn't. Okay, Kirk Cousins is going to be able to do that. And so if you want to bet, like, these are all better bets on the sports books. Like, 1.5 for over passing TDs. What I mean by that, guys, is obviously with prop betting, PrizePicks, and Underdog, we're trying to get our best EV bets. And the way that's done is by looking at the bets that have a 54% chance to hit, especially when we take out the juice from the odds that we're getting, because that gives us a statistical edge on them over the long term. Like, if you make those bets where it's 54% likelihood to hit, you're going to be profitable in the long term. And honestly, this line for Kirk Cousins is probably too low as well. Like, I just expect them to crush. And so if you want to make these prop bets on PrizePicks, by all means you can. We can see at this line right here on Underdog, that's going to be a good line. That's a very good bet there on Underdog. So you can go ahead and make that there. Same thing with Jordan Addison there. Like, we are getting a decent stacking opportunity there on Underdog. And same thing with TJ Hawkinson. This line is going to be a 50-50 split. I think we'd be better off doing some sort of receptions prop with TJ Hawkinson, because when we look at TJ Hawkinson, he's going to get targeted heavily. Like, I'm expecting at least 7 targets in this game. And the Bears, they're a little bit easier of a matchup for opposing tight ends. So someone like TJ Hawkinson, you expect to be able to take advantage of that matchup. Once again, though, I think if we can get, honestly, 4.5, 5. If it's at 5, I'd probably still take the over there, a reception. So I'm very interested to see where that line comes out. Worth calling out, Bilal Powell was someone that got a lot of work and actually looked good doing it. He's got some familiarity in the KOC system. And so I don't know what the line is that we could get on him, but if it's like 1.5 receptions, I'd be fine betting the over there. And even like 25 receiving yards, I'd still probably be okay betting the over. Now, it sounds like I'm bashing on the Bears, but let's go ahead and see if we can find any good prop bets for them. You got to remember, their top running backs going to be out, and most likely the second running back is going to be out as well. They're going to be left with Deonta Foreman, and honestly, that might be one of those things where we see the Bears just heavily feed him, because he is one of those guys. If you guys watch Thursday Night Football this week, like AJ Dillon, you keep just getting 3 yards or so and extending drives. That could be the way the Bears go. And so for Justin Fields and like the Bears right now, I'm probably just staying away. We don't have any other props. Like I'm curious to see what we get for Darnell Mooney. He had a big game there. Fields just missed him on every single target. I'm interested to see where lines we get on him, because you do expect Fields to make those throws. At least you expect the NFL starting quarterback to make those throws. So interested to see what kind of lines we get for Mooney. I don't know. I don't think I'm being biased there, guys, but I'm a Packers fan. I always say this, like, these two teams are supposed to be the rivals for the Packers. And I don't think I'm being biased here. FYI. You watch the Vikings play and you realize they probably should have a winning record. You watch the Bears play. They beat up on a Denver team and then choked it away. And then Washington. That was just weird. It was a weird one. That was just one mediocre team that's kind of young, just not playing well. I blame their head coach more so there. And shout out to Luke Getsy, the Bears offensive coordinator, because that was really good. That was a really good performance by him. Looking at the next game, we got Seattle versus the Bengals. Also a very interesting game. We need to know the news on T. Higgins. We're probably not going to get any props on this game until we get news on T. Higgins. Is he going to be active or not? Okay. Currently questionable with ribs, and personally, I think he's going to sit. So someone like Tyler Boyd is someone we could be looking at. Watching the game, there was a touchdown to Tyler Boyd that got nullified by an illegal hands to the face. It didn't really change the outcome of the play. I think Tyler Boyd still scores. AKA, I think Joe Burrow still gets the pass off. So that's something that's not going to show up in the box score. And so we might get a nice line on Tyler Boyd. For Seattle, DK Metcalf, questionable with ribs injury. He is expected to play. Jamal Adams has a concussion. They're coming off of a bye, so you expect all these players that maybe were questionable last week to play. And this is probably one of the more fascinating games. Bengals are favored by 3 points. Seattle coming in off of a bye, though, should be healthier, ready to go. 44.5 point spread, or over and under. Very interesting game as a whole. Let's just go ahead and take a peek at Seattle's props. And we're not getting that many just yet. Like, the only prop that we're getting is going to be Noah Fant as like a decent prop for the over. And then the other two are just going to be pushes. Now, I do think we have a little bit of a stacking opportunity here. I think this game has a chance to be a high scoring game, to be a little bit of a shootout, and then we could just be betting a lot of the overs. I actually want to take a deeper dive into this Noah Fant prop. What I want to see is the snaps from him. Yeah, they were pretty low. And I was going to say, it's probably the wrong move. Yeah, I don't think we're touching Noah Fant there. I'd actually probably favor the under. A lot of his receiving yards came from one big play. They're doing a lot of 12 personnel. They're doing a lot of 3 tight end rotation. And so I don't know if I want to be touching Noah Fant. Geno Smith, if you're stacked in this game, I actually don't mind the over there. Tyler Lockett, you could do that there as well. We're just not getting that many props on him just yet. Now for the Bengals, we're obviously not going to get as many props for this game as well, because T. Higgins is currently questionable. For what it's worth, let's just talk about if T. Higgins plays and sits. If he plays, I'm probably just not looking at any other props. If he sits, I think Tyler Boyd at like over 4.5 receptions would be a good one. He has been someone that's gotten 7, 8, and 9 targets the last 4 weeks. I'm kind of not taking a look at Cleveland. I don't think we need to worry about that. You look at Joe Mixon, he really hasn't been a good runner just yet. He's been a good runner, not great. He's doing what he's supposed to, not exceeding that at all. And so they have been throwing the football a little bit more. And so if that continues, I think Tyler Boyd has a really good chance to get over 4.5 reception. We'll see if the line is put that way. It might be set at 5. It might be set at 5.5. I do think he's going to have a good game in this one. It's just, how does that come? Maybe a better over fantasy score situation for him. Found it interesting. Irv Smith was back last week, did not draw a single target in that game. That's probably something you would expect to be corrected. He did play in 61% of the snaps, but I found that to be interesting. They really just went to Trenton Irwin early and often. He was available, or he was open a lot on easy passing catches for Joe Burrow. And you could say the reason why Joe Burrow had a good game was because Irwin was open early and often, and that kind of set the tone for Burrow. And then Jamar Chase also had himself a really good game. And so, like I said, I do think there's a stacking opportunity here. Like, if you want to do Jamar Chase for over his receiving yards, the only way I'm doing that is if we're doing it in a game stack. Moving on into the next game, we got the Niners versus the Browns. I don't know. So I know this is really dependent on Deshaun Watson being active or not. If he sits, yes, 8.5 for the spread, probably correct. If Deshaun Watson plays, I think there's a good chance that this could be a sneaky upset option. The Browns are coming in off of a disappointing week the previous week, but that's because they had their rookie quarterback, DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, just not ready to go. It was pretty clear. The game total is very low for this one because the Browns do have a good defense. And I know the Niners have looked good. They're coming in off of that awesome win, and it kind of just feels like a trap spot for them. They got to have one bad game here. And why not against the Cleveland Browns, who, if they have their starters, and it's a long laundry list of players that need to be ready to go. Got David Njoku, who suffered those burns. That's pretty unfortunate for him. Jerome Ford, questionable with a knee. expected to play. Myles Garrett needs to play. Deshaun Watson needs to play. So we're not going to get any lines for the Browns because it's so situational. But I would almost say if Watson sits, we could be looking at like Jerome Ford to have a good rushing day or just a good total yards day. If Deshaun Watson plays, I think we're looking at like Cooper Kupp to have a good game. That'd be kind of the route that we could go. For the Niners, I do think it's worth pointing out Elijah Mitchell, still question. He said Jordan Mason is going to be someone that's going to be the RB number 2. Now that might not matter too much, but we might get a prop for him because this game is expected to be a blowout. So for these two teams, we're not getting any props just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and move on into the next game. And that's going to be Houston versus the Saints, a 1.5 point spread, 42.3 for an over and under. So we're seeing a lot of these games are going to be lower scoring than previous weeks. The biggest news item for the Texans is going to be Tank Dell, most likely going to sit with concussion. So that's going to lead to maybe some more playing time for Mechie, who actually had a really awesome catch last week. You also have Robert Woods currently questionable with a ribs injury. I expect him to play. If he sits, then we're probably just looking at Dalton Schultz to get a little bit more work, but mostly just Nico Collins to continue to do a lot of work. The one interesting note would be that they have gotten Dameon Pierce the ball a little bit more frequently, and that's really opened up this offense. Dameon Pierce has looked good. Maybe they just try to run the football a little bit more if that occurs. For the Saints, Chris Olave, questionable toe injury. You expect him to play. Juwan Johnson, is he going to be back? Because that's an interesting thing, because he's someone I expected to have a really good game or a really good season, and that's probably my worst call this season. I've had a lot of awesome calls telling people to draft Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua in best ball drafts, Tank Dell as well. But I also was saying Juwan Johnson's like a great late flyer at tight end, and that's one of my bad calls thus far. But we are getting a decent amount of props there for the Saints. I'm actually curious. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the team trends here. This is on RotoWire. I want to see how many snaps he played. Rashid Rice on the top there, because he's been someone that's playing a little bit more snaps, and that could be something that continues. And so if it does, this does feel like kind of a low number. Now, he hasn't been as involved in the passing offense, but we can still see he's going to get a couple of longer shots down the field. Last week, they didn't need to throw the football, and he almost got the over there. And so as long as this game stays close, I do think we are going to get a great shot at him getting that over. So that's actually one of the decent ones that I think we are getting on the slate. Derek Carr, will he pull and rush the football? It's up for you guys to decide. Michael Thomas for over 49.5 receiving yards. I would say, sure, if Chris Olave is actually banged up, then he has a good chance to do that. I still think I want to be looking at a receptions prop for him. We have seen his receptions props be lower than they really should, because he has been someone that has been getting targeted heavily. So once again, if this game stays close, you expect him to get closer to 5 receptions. So if the line is set at 5 or 4.5, I think that'd be one we can go ahead and target. If it's going to be 5.5, it's probably just we're staying away from that. Derek Carr over passing yards, that actually is something that kind of intrigues me as well. Alvin Kamara has really looked good, don't get me wrong, but once again, if the game stays close, I do expect Carr to be able to nickel and dime his way there. What I'm seeing is we might have a decent stacking opportunity there. Yeah, for Houston, we're not going to get any props just yet. All right, so moving on into the next game here. It's going to be the Colts versus the Jaguars, a game that I'm pretty fascinated by in general. The Jaguars are going to be 4-point favorites in this game, and really the question is which Trevor Lawrence shows up. His play this season has still been a little bit sporadic, and they're going to be back in Jacksonville this week, so maybe that adds another element to it. Looking at the injury situation, we know that Anthony Richardson is going to be out, and then it's just what is going to happen with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. It seemed pretty clear that the Colts' intentions were to only get Jonathan Taylor 10 snaps, because it started out as basically a split for him and Zach Moss at the start of the game, and then once Jonathan Taylor hit 10 snaps, it was done from that point on. Now, there were a bunch of plays, not a bunch, there were a few plays where it was designed to go to the outside, run plays designed to go to the outside, that I'm watching and I'm like, man, Jonathan Taylor probably breaks that for a touchdown, whereas Zach Moss was not able to do that. Now, Zach Moss had easily his best game as a pro. He looked really good between the tackles. If you saw his goal line touchdown, that was spectacular. I mean, not many players are scoring right there. That was awesome. All in all, though, it's easy to see that Jonathan Taylor, arguably the best running back in the league when he was healthy, that's going to be an upgrade at some point when they let it happen. Now, he needs to get back into football shape, so we'll see if that happens this week. With Gardner Minshew at quarterback, they are going to be probably throwing it a little bit more. At the same time, you would think that would lead to a little bit more open lanes for the running backs. Now, the Colts did struggle against the run against the Jaguars in week 1. A little bit different, very different, I would say, look for both teams. more so the Colts though. Looking at the Jaguars injury situation, Zay Jones currently questionable with a knee injury. That would just mean that Kirk is pretty much locked into his role, I would say. And then someone like Tim Jones is still going to see a lot of snaps. Evan Ingram is someone that's been a consistent fantasy producer as well. I think he would get a little bit of a bump. But when we look at the props that we are getting in this game, we're going to see Josh Downs. This is going to be everyone's favorite one. It seems like Josh Downs had himself a pretty good game last week, but I think people are going to be chasing that production. I mean, he looked good. The ball was coming his way. He caught all 6 of his targets, and him getting a heavy target share is nothing new. Like, we have seen that a bunch already. The issue is when we look at like the team trends, we're going to see that Alec Pierce is still getting a lot of snaps. At some point, there's going to be a good Alec Pierce game. I'm not saying that's going to happen this week, but eventually it's due to happen. So maybe that bounces his way this week. Michael Pittman firmly going to be in play. He's playing so many snaps. He's going to be a consistent fantasy producer. Looking at this though, guys, like there shouldn't be this big of a separation, I would say, between the two. I know Alec Pierce hasn't been productive just yet. He's had a couple of close plays that weren't made. You got Gardner Minshew there, who just kind of likes to throw it up. And honestly, if this game is a little bit more of a shootout, I think we could see Minshew, Pierce, and possibly Downs for a stack. I actually like this little stack here, Pierce and Minshew a little bit. Zach Moss, do you want to bet the over there? Probably not. We're probably just not touching it. We're just taking a wait and see approach there. I do expect Jonathan Taylor for it to be much more of a 50-50 split in this game. We're going to see 16.4% of the snaps, which, heck, if we look at in previous games, that's even lower than what it was for Trey Sermon during that same spell. So I'd expect Taylor to probably get at least 30% of the snaps in this game, and that's enough for me to want to stay away from Zach Moss. So now we go ahead and get into the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this is kind of fascinating. We are getting a lot of good props. I mentioned that I thought Evan Ingram, he's someone that I do think is going to benefit from having Zay Jones potentially out. And so looking at Ingram, he has just been a consistent target getter. I mean, how many tight ends can you say has gotten 8 targets in the last 4 games? I mean, that is spectacular. Now the Bills are a little bit better of a defense. We know that. Colts are not. They're a little bit worse. Now against opposing tight ends, they are about middle of the pack. Evan Ingram is not exactly being used as a typical tight end. He's running a bunch of routes. Probably one of the more athletic tight ends. Like, I don't need to tell you guys that. You know that. But just given the fact that he has basically gotten that in every single game, and if Zay Jones is going to be banged up or not playing in this game, I think that only elevates his likelihood to get over those receiving yards. We can see he has done that in every single game but last game, and he still saw 8 targets in that one. So that is one of my favorite ones. We are seeing Trevor Lawrence for over 1.5 passing touchdowns, about a 53% chance for that one to hit. Now, Trevor Lawrence has definitely been interesting. Like 2 games ago, he should have had 2 passing touchdowns, but he's just too inconsistent, guys. Like, I don't know. It's tough for me to trust him. It just is. And I know Travis Etienne's been dominating, and that's great. I don't know. I just, until Trevor Lawrence is more consistent, I can't really bank on him personally. And it does get me a little bit weary about his other weapons. I still think I'm going to be going with the Evan Ingram one. And really, guys, that's the first prop on this video that I feel comfortable writing down as a prop that I probably want to go back to, is that Evan Ingram one. Okay. You could do Trevor Lawrence over rush yards. Seems to be a decent one there. Christian Kirk definitely been playing well. Calvin Ridley did have his huge game against the Colts in the first game. Played a little bit better last week. That is something you could go to. And I actually don't mind the over passing yards for Trevor Lawrence as well. But once again, it's just, I would only be like trying to game stack this game if I'm using Trevor Lawrence. So now we move on into the next game. We got the Carolina Panthers versus the Miami Dolphins. Super big spread in this game. 13.5 points the Dolphins are favored by. It is a high scoring game as well. We look at the injury report. Obviously we know that Achane is out. We also know that Jeff Wilson Jr. still in the IR, is practicing this week. The question is, what is his workload going to be, and how is he going to be used? I should phrase it that way. And I bring that up because super fascinating here. Okay, guys, get ready for a really good take, I think. You look at how Devon Achane was being used. It was how Ezekama, the receiver, was being used as well. Another speedy player once Ezekama went down, and also Ahmed as well. But I think now looking back on it, it was more Ezekama getting injured that led to Achane being used the way that he is. I mentioned this on my previews video for the NFL DFS week, is that a lot of people didn't really, like, he was pretty chalk for those of you guys that don't know in DFS, and chalk is just pretty much a lot of people around him. People didn't really realize that he wasn't the RB1 in the offense. It was still Raheem Mostert. And we saw that last week where a lot of his production actually came with Mostert on the field. Okay, like not your traditional running back snaps. It was actually a lot of ends arounds, motions, and stuff like that, where maybe a fake handoff went to Mostert. And so my biggest worry is that now we're going to see Jeff Wilson come back and actually take over the RB1 role, whereas Mostert is actually going to take over that Ezekama Achane role, which to me is like super fascinating because if you look at the skill set, Mostert's a faster player than is Jeff Wilson. And now they could, with how good Mostert has looked, like they could just go a little bit of Tyreek Hill, a little bit of Jalen Waddle, sure. Maybe even Chase Claypool, sure. It's just a fascinating thought process there. And then also they got Chris Brooks, who is an rookie free agent who he's a different runner than Achane, but I think Chris Brooks is actually the best, like not pure, how should I phrase this? He's like the best traditional running back of the group, if that makes sense, where if you put him in any offense, he's going to be the one that's going to be consistently the most successful, and that's going to be because of his patience, vision, and footwork. I mean, watch any of the clips from him from the preseason or the game against the Denver Broncos. You'll see what I'm saying there. It's not, I don't even feel like that's a hot take. But obviously for this system, it is one cut and go, if that, right? The zone read stuff, you're just trying to get upfield, and that's not exactly him. So he's a very interesting player because they used him a lot as kind of a fullback too. Like he played a decent amount of snaps, Chris Brooks. So like he is someone that I think could be a surprise as well. And so I'm just super fascinated by how Mike McDaniels is going to go ahead and use his running backs this week. And heck, maybe Ahmed actually becomes the RB2 once again. It's super fascinating. I'm sorry, that was a lot of time, I know, but I'm just interested in that. And then looking here, Miles Sanders currently questionable again. He's always questionable. We expect him to play. He did split snaps with both Chuba Hubbard and Laviska Shenault, which Shenault probably was their best runner as well. It was super weird. It was a weird week last week. And I say that because Rondale Moore, also a receiver that got a lot of running back snaps as well. But for the Panthers, we don't have much to like look at. Let's just go ahead and get into the prop. So starting with Miami, the best one that we are currently getting is actually Jonathan Mingo for over his receiving yard. He is looking better each game, I would say. He was something that I was kind of excited about in the draft. Then he went to Carolina. I'm like, well, he should at least get instant playing time. And we have seen that occur. Like we look at the snaps, we're going to see Mingo basically playing 83% of the snaps. Okay. We are seeing so many 3 receiver sets. And given how this game's going to go, he's the one player where you look at DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, they're 2 players where even if this game's a blowout, I'm going to phrase this better. If this game is a blowout, there's no need to get them their full allotment of snaps, which is basically all the snaps. You can see that get reduced down to 80%. For Jonathan Mingo, I think he's like guaranteed to get his work essentially. One issue would be Terrace Marshall because he was surprisingly a player that did not play a single snap last week, which he had been someone that was getting targeted heavily. I mean, that was a weird one there, I thought. So it does seem like they're going with Shenault a little bit, or with Mingo a little bit more. And so I do trust him a little bit more. Miami hasn't exactly been the best against the pass. So yeah, I can get behind this being a good EV bet for us. Hayden Hurst just not playing enough snaps. Adam Thielen, 5.5 receptions. I feel like a lot of people are going to be going in on that one. And I'm not saying it's wrong. Bryce Young is looking to him early and often. Once again, the game should promote a pass-heavy game script for the Carolina Panthers as well. I probably do like this one, honestly. After his first 2 games and even after Minnesota, because you look at New Orleans, all right, maybe that was a little bit fluky. Who knows? Seattle, all right, they're bad against the pass. You look at Minnesota, all right, they're bad against the pass. But then it happened against Detroit again. And maybe that's just going to be something that continuously happens. Now, I will say I do still think DJ Chark is going to be more and more involved during the preseason. It actually seemed like he was Bryce Young's favorite target, and he hasn't exactly been bad, just hasn't exactly been good. Looking at Bryce Young, I want to know let's see if we're getting any pass attempt props on him, because that could be something there. Okay, and we're not just yet, but that is one where maybe we look at pass attempts. We might have a chance to stack a little bit in this game as well. So yeah, I think I might go Mingo and I might go Thielen there. I don't mind those. Now we look at Miami. I don't know if we're going to get any Mostert props until we get Jeff Wilson confirmed in or out. I'm expecting him to play. Tyreek Hill's receiving yards at 86.5 is probably right. It's looking like it's right. Tua, I don't know if we need to bet really anything here. I feel like these are just like the right lines there. I think what we want to be looking at is like rushing attempts for maybe Mostert, or maybe just fantasy score for Mostert. If we get like 12.5 or lower, I'd be going in on that pretty heavily, because I think it's expected that he's going to be scoring a touchdown in this game. All right, so from there, we got the New England Patriots versus the Las Vegas Raiders, a game full of so many revenge narratives for the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh McDaniels, Jimmy G, Jacoby Myers. It's actually weird. Like, you got Patriots 2.0 actually playing a little bit better than them. Two 8.7 spread, 41.5 for the over and under. It's most likely going to be an ugly game, but let's just go ahead and break it down. So for the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't think we need to worry about really anything for them. Max Crosby, we expect him to play. That actually, if he doesn't, that could open up a lot for the Patriots. Obviously, offensively, a little bit more time and whatnot. Devontae Adams questionable with the shoulder. We expect him to play. Trey Tucker is actually an interesting one. If he were to sit, maybe that leads to a little bit more playing time for Hunter Renfrow. We'll see. For the Patriots, yeah, they are still really banged up, and these are the two biggest ones here, guys. Demario Douglas, who, this sucks because if you guys have been following the channel, I've been looking for Demario Douglas to get more snaps. Made a big play last week, got a concussion on the play early on in the game. Juju gets a concussion. Maybe it's saving me because in DFS I would have just loaded up on Douglas, and probably props wise as well. He's literally been their best offensive weapon, and they're just not using him. And sadly, Zeke has probably been the second best as well. That's how bad this team has been thus far. Let's see if we get any good props in this one. For what it's worth as well, if those two receivers are out, it actually might be Ty Montgomery getting more work as a receiver. And we can see we're getting a lot of props for this one. We got Mike Gesicki for over receiving yards at 18.5. I'm actually curious what his snaps were last week with those two receivers getting out with a concussion. Let's see. Obviously, Kendrick Bourne got a lot more snaps. I think that's something we're going to be looking at. But I wanted to see Gesicki did not get more work. It was a blowout too. We got to remember that the last two games for the Patriots have been blowouts. Gesicki has pretty much just been playing in two tight end sets. So I would say this game staying close would actually help Gesicki out a little bit there. But maybe we just see a lot more two tight end sets. I do expect Ty Montgomery to basically play the slot. It's fascinating there. Mac Jones, I also kind of expect him to pull the football and run with it a little bit more frequently in this game. Zeke, that's an interesting one. Let's take a peek at that. Receiving yards for Zeke. He has been getting used in the passing game enough to be annoying. And maybe that's something you look at. We know that the Raiders are not good at stopping running backs. Heck, AJ Dillon, who's looked terrible over the past year and a half, had himself a good game. Maybe we're just looking at Zeke for over total yards there, 40 if we get that combo. I think I would like that. Stevenson, you expect him to have a better game, although that just hasn't happened yet. Parker, I'm just not touching. I do really like Kendrick Bourne here. That might be something I'm writing down. The issue with this one is obviously we can tell it's a much better bet on Vegas. If you want to bet over 39.5 receiving yards on one of the sports books to do that. I want to call it though specifically here on Underdog. That's going to be a much better bet there where it's at 38.5 for his receiving yards. Interesting. And then we got Mac Jones. It's dude, you should have a much better game this game against the Raiders. I know Matt LaFleur had just probably his worst game plan I can remember in recent memory. I don't know what was going on there. It was strange. It was almost like they had a game plan around Aaron Jones being active, and then they're surprised by Aaron Jones. You should be able to pass on the Raiders. Maybe there's a stacking opportunity here, but it sounds weird to say, but with Douglas not there, I just don't get excited about this passing game. I do want to pull up Kendrick Bourne though, because we did see the snaps were up last week, 86.3. They had been down because they had been spreading out the wealth a little bit, and they're probably just going to need him to play a bunch of snaps again. And I know he didn't get that many targets, but he probably should be getting more targets, especially in a game where you're playing from behind. Just weird. And if he does, he has been pretty close to getting the over as is in these other games. Now that he has to probably be a little bit more of a focal point, I think I like that, especially on Underdog there. All right, we got three more games here. Detroit versus Tampa Bay. Another fascinating one, I think. 3.3 is the average spread with the over and under set at 42.5. So eventually the Lions are not going to play as well as they have been playing. That's going to come down at some point, and I would say maybe this is finally the week. The question is, can Baker Mayfield continue to play good enough? We do know that Jahmyr Gibbs currently questionable for the Lions with a hamstring injury. I'm kind of expecting him not to play. We know that once these hamstrings pop up, these injuries pop up, and a player misses a game, it's typically 4 weeks. That should be the assumption. So he's already missed one. He's got 3 more left. He could play through it, but why do that? Especially when Craig Reynolds looked really good last week as well as the second string running back. So it should be the David Montgomery show again. Now he does get a much more difficult matchup there against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I haven't seen anything on Sam Laporta just yet. I'm expecting him to play for what it's worth. For the Bucs, the biggest injury news is going to be Mike Evans. I just mentioned that 4-week thing. So I expect Mike Evans not to play. So I expect the tunnel vision that Baker Mayfield had to go to Chris Godwin again this week. And I phrased it that way because you guys will see here. We look at Mike Evans, 10 targets, had himself really good games. And then we look at Chris Godwin. When did he finally have a really good game? With Mike Evans out. Okay, so I do expect that tunnel vision to go to him. The issue is Detroit should know it's coming, right? And the nice thing about betting on someone like Chris Godwin, and I don't think we're getting any props because we do need to know the news on Mike Evans. But once that prop eventually comes out, if Mike Evans plays or is inactive, Chris Godwin is still probably their most talented offensive weapon. Like, regardless of if Evans plays or not, he's still going to have a good chance to have a really big game. I would say if he's inactive, that's going to hurt him more. The only prop that we are currently getting is Rachaad White. He's looked better each game. I have to say it. Like, I wasn't that high on him, and he has looked better every single game thus far. If you want to bet him for over rush yards at 46.5, he is going to be playing a decent amount. I don't hate it. Probably not for me, but I wouldn't talk you out of that. Looking at Detroit here, we're probably not getting any because we do need to get some news on ASB as well. He's expected back, I think, this week, but we don't have that confirmed yet. And Jahmyr Gibbs as well. We're not getting any props for them just yet. So now the Cardinals versus the Rams, another game that I really kind of like. The Rams are favored by 7 points. This game should be a high-scoring game, though. Looking at the Rams, not too much injury news-wise, which good for them. That's awesome. Looking at the Cardinals, there is a decent amount of injury news. Marquise Brown illness. That's probably not going to leave him out. Keontae Ingram currently listed as the #1 running back on the depth chart, but he's recovering from a neck injury. If he sits, it is going to be DeMarcado, the undrafted rookie free agent, he looked good, but he also looked soft. Like, he's easy to take down, but he did have some good vision. He's just kind of another guy. Actually, he's less than another guy. So, like, Keontae Ingram will eventually be, I think, the RB1 in that offense while James Conner is out. DeMarcado, probably going to be more of a pass catching back, though. Last week, I kind of mentioned that Michael Wilson, it was great to see him have a breakout game, but also it kind of felt, I don't want to say fluky, but at the same time, like, they need to get Rondale Moore more involved. And we saw that happen last week. He actually had a few running back carries. And so maybe we can get a total yards prop on him. But that's another team where we're just not getting those props just yet. Now the Rams, because we already know what's going on injury wise, we are getting a lot of props. Cooper Kupp is set at 7.5 for receptions, which is kind of crazy to me. Wow, how fast that happened, right? I would actually much rather go with Puka Nacua for over 5.5 receptions. I think that'd be the best route to go. Obviously, they just traded Van Jefferson as well. It's because Tutu Atwell's look good, guys. Tyler Higbee at 3.5 receptions is weird. I thought he would take the biggest hit, and he did, but that's just weird to see it that low. Actually, I want to talk about Kyron Williams and also Tutu Atwell because, yes, we're not getting any props on them just yet, but maybe once we do, that's something we're looking at. Tutu Atwell, guys, he should have had a touchdown in this game, another one, I should say, and it would have been like, I don't know, the ball traveled like 40 yards in the air, and I think it was at like half field. I don't know, it would have been a massive play. It would have been like 70 yards, I believe, and a touchdown. Like Matthew Stafford had just missed him on the play. Tutu Atwell was wide open, though. So he should have had a much better game than it looks like. Like, he still had 5 targets. He was still decently involved, right? A little bit tougher of a defense. It wouldn't be shocking to see him have a good game. So I am super interested to see what his line is this week because that could be a sneaky good play for us. Like, if it's set at, well, honestly, 2.5 receptions, I'd probably bet the over there. Yeah, Puka Nacua, though, I still like the over 5.5 receptions. That seems too low. He's still going to be targeted heavily. This is still going to be a game in which we're probably seeing them pass a lot. And then Kyron Williams, I thought probably his best game yet, which sounds weird to say, but the way that he was able to kind of navigate his body to get extra yards while going to the ground, I thought was his best of the season thus far. Looked good in the passing game. I know he only had 4 yards, but that was like the most, let's say, comfortable he looked. And now he gets a really good matchup against Arizona. This is maybe one where, because he had a bad game last week on paper, maybe we're going to get a good fantasy score line for him. Like, honestly, if it's at 9.5, 10.5, I would say I'd still bet the over on him. All right, so now the last game for the Sunday main slate there. Eagles versus the Jets. All right, the Jets are going to be favored to, sounds weird to say, the Jets are underdogs by 7 points. There we go. 41 for the spread, though, or for the over and under. So a very low game total there. Looking at the Jets, injury-wise, nothing much there, honestly. Looking at the Eagles, I think the biggest thing I want to note is that Quez Watkins was back last week. That's really it. I think it's also worth noting that, Devonta Smith was a little bit aggravated by not getting some work. And so maybe that's something this week where he gets force fed the ball, like we saw with AJ Brown after week 2. Like, the same exact thing happened. I really feel like there's a good stacking opportunity. So Quez Watkins, let's start with this one. Quez, in 2 out of 3 games, has gotten at least 2 targets in those games. Last week almost had another catch there. Jalen Hurts actually missed him, so he would have got his over receiving yards in that game. So, it sounds weird to say, like, in those situations where a quarterback misses a receiver, because we know there's a lot of things that go into a receiver catching a pass. The right play call, being open, catching the ball themselves, staying in bounds. but also it's the quarterback making the read and the quarterback hitting the read. And then also you got to depend on the defender not breaking it up and everything. But more times than not, in situations where a player was open like him, you expect that to be made. So I don't want to say like, oh, he should have hit it 2 out of 3 times. Like, I don't like using that because he didn't. But at the same time, he should have been over 2 out of 3 games thus far. And I believe, let's just check the snap count with the Philly snap count. Where is he? Yeah, I was going to say, I believe he didn't play that many snaps in that game against Minnesota because he got injured. That's true. Okay. While I have this pulled up, we do see that Swift probably around 62% of the snaps in this game. But it's really heavy, right? Like it's Hurts, Brown, Goddard, Smith. Those are the players that are heavily involved. I will say Kenneth Gainwell, if this game is a blowout like they think it's going to be, and the weakness for this team has kind of been rushing the football for the Jets, you can take advantage of them on the ground. Maybe we're looking at Swift for over rush yards, but maybe we get a Kenneth Gainwell prop that we've been going in on as well. Obviously, we're not getting that just yet, but maybe there's something there. DVP wise, we look at a tight end matchup. The Jets are the best one, and so you look at something like Dallas Goedert, who's coming in off of his best game of the year thus far. I actually really like the over receiving yards here for Dallas Goedert as well. Maybe you can look at a little bit of a stack, but I don't think it was a fluke that Goddard got the ball as much as he did, and he actually looked really good doing it as well last week, guys. Like just making people miss, getting the extra yards, very tough, hard-nosed plays. And it's not surprising to see him get targets, like 9 targets, 7 targets. Like you just expect him to have another good game here. And so I think I'm going to be betting the over there. I'll pull up the Swift game log. I do like the over. Like the Jets were defeatable on the run game. I think they're going to be attacking that spot. I just do. Did we just go over like the combo yards there for Swift? Was it like 70, almost 80, I guess? That might be the route to go still. But yeah, I mentioned this, guys. Like I don't think there should ever be this big of a separation between AJ Brown and Smith. It's just like, which player is it going to be? How are they going to attack? Is it going to be by strength and size, or is it going to be by quickness and smooth route running? I do think Smith has been a little bit more injured than maybe has been made to public, but still he was frustrated. I think he's going to get forced fed the ball. I actually kind of like that prop a lot. 52.5. Yeah, it shouldn't be that much different than AJ Brown. Then lastly, the New York Jets. All right, Zach Wilson, is he going to have any design runs? That's my biggest question, because that to me is where they have failed him. Like he has good feet. Let him have 2 or 3 design rush plays per game. Let it happen. I'm probably staying away from that one. I actually probably like Tyler Conklin the most. 25.5 receiving yards. He had probably the sickest route out of any player last week, guys. Tyler Conklin made a linebacker like fall down. He gives him a little shimmy shake, like literally that's it, like a little jab step, and then he breaks out and he left the defender in his shoes. Like, oh my gosh, it's almost funny how bad he made him look. But we can see Tyler Conklin, guys, with Zach Wilson as the starting quarterback in fantasy purposes and in games that Wilson has started and finished, Tyler Conklin is a top 10 fantasy tight end. I don't think people really realize that. And so we can see his yardage total at 25.5 basically he has gotten the over in 4 straight games. So in all games where Zach Wilson has started and finished, he has gotten the over. And if we look here, that is basically one of the bigger weaknesses that the Eagles have. So I hate that 2 of my favorite props this week are going to be actually 3 of my favorite props this week are going to be tight end based props, but man, that's kind of the slate that we have. So I do like Tyler Conklin for over 25.5 receiving yards. From there, not touching Dalvin Cook. Breece Hall, I just want to bring this up. Let's pull up the snap counts for them, because last week they said, all right, we're taking the training wheels off. Breece Hall is not going to be limited at all. That led to him getting about 4% more snaps. Maybe like, wow, right? They still had Michael Carter involved. They still had Dalvin Cook. But for Dalvin Cook's sake, I do think he's going to continue to see less and less work. So, I would actually probably want to bet the under there. For Breece Hall, I feel like people are going to be baited into that one. Probably not touching that one there. What I found interesting last week is like, we can't really predict how coaches are going to go about attacking games. I found it strange that they didn't try to manufacture touches to Garrett Wilson like they had at the second half of the Chiefs game. And then obviously, the second half, which game was that? It was the game before the Chiefs, which was New England. Okay, in the second half of that game, they were starting to manufacture touches to Garrett Wilson. Then we saw that obviously happen against the Chiefs. And then against Denver, a team that hasn't been good against the pass, I thought we were going to see that again. We did not, which I found that to be strange. So do they manufacture touches to Garrett Wilson? We will see. I will still say he has found ways to get a bunch of yards regardless. I feel like we could maybe stack this game. I still like Zach Wilson for over his passing yards, and this has actually went down a little bit. I think we could stack Wilson, and Tyler Conklin there. I feel pretty good about that because they're pass-heavy script, obviously. You could do DeAndre Swift for over his rush yards, and then We could also do Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith. I actually think that is a very strong 6 slip correlated bet. I don't mind that. But now with all the games done, let's going into my bet of the day. All right, so here are my 5 favorite bets thus far for this week. And I say thus far, obviously we know this stuff's going to change. And I do hate the fact that like 3 of my favorite bets are going to be tight end based props. I do feel pretty good about the Tyler Conklin one and the Evan Ingram one. Maybe I'm forcing a little bit with Dallas Goedert. We're taking our current best EV bet, which is going to be Jonathan Mingo for over 26.5 receiving yards. And then I do want to remind you guys, this Kendrick Bourne one, a little bit better on Underdog where it's set at 38.5. Okay, slight edge, but that obviously can be the difference between cash and not cash. That's going to be all for this video. Be on the lookout for more props videos throughout the week because I will be covering it a little bit more definitively, probably on Saturday, to cover the NFL slate for PrizePicks and Underdog. That's all. If you guys want access to the cheat sheet, 95sports.com is just $10 a month. All right, that's all. Let's have a good slate. As always, let's keep cashing.